Good evening, friends. I'm Homi Bhabha. I direct the Mahindra Humanities Center here at Harvard. And it's a great pleasure to invite you to and welcome you to one of our Writers Speak sessions for this semester. Writers Speak is a platform of the Humanities Center, very ably headed by my dear, beloved friend, Claire Messud, who is a professor of the practice of writing and is a wonderful, and I say this without any prejudice whatsoever, wonderful, reflective, beautiful novelist. And it's been one of the great pleasures of my tenure as director of the center to work with Claire on a number of occasions. It is actually a tribute to Claire that since she started working with us to set up the Writers Speak series, she has chosen writers to come to the campus who effortlessly represent a large variety of communities, ethnicities, and cultures. There has been no forced identitarian agenda here. She has just chosen writers who she thought were significant. We've discussed them, and she's brought them, and that has really enriched the archive of our thinking about contemporary writing. So often the discussion is about bringing writers of color or bringing writers who lack all color, but Claire has a fabulous instinct of bringing great writers, fascinating writers, and as it happens, they have come from almost every continent and many countries, and they're writers of all colors. In fact, the slightly tinged lilac ones were my favorite. So Claire, thank you very much for this great Catholic vision of what writing today is about and where the voices come from. And in fact, tomorrow, Richard Price, Edison Julio, and Michelle Kuo, accompanied by Claire Messud, will be in Emerson 210 at 6 p.m. Speaking to a panel titled The Words to Say It, Teaching and Writing in Incarceration. Please welcome my friend and colleague, Claire Messud.
Thank you, Homi. Thank you, everyone, for coming. It's my great pleasure to introduce Richard this evening and to be in conversation. And yes, as Homi mentioned, there are a number of events around Richard's visit and also the visit of Lorraine Adams. And tomorrow, the 6 o'clock panel will be upstairs, involving also Edison Julio and Michelle Kuo in a discussion about teaching, writing, and incarceration. I hope you can make it. Now I need my glasses. I was saying to somebody, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Fawlty Towers, but this week I am a little bit like somebody in Fawlty Towers. I put on one hat and then I move into another room. I put on another hat. Next thing I'll be wearing a kimono and offering massages, whatever. But okay. As Michiko Kakutani wrote in her New York Times review of Richard Price's most recent novel, The Whites, Mr. Price has a knack for using detective work the way John le Carré has used spy stories and tradecraft as a framework on which to build complex human investigations into the human soul. Richard Price is the author of 9 novels, including The Wanderers, Clockers, Freedomland, Lush Life, and The Whites. He's also an acclaimed scriptwriter for both film and television, whose credits include The Color of Money, 1986, Ransom, 1996, the series The Wire, 2002, and last year's Emmy-nominated HBO series The Night Of. His new show currently on air on HBO is The Deuce. He's also a frequent contributor to the Moth Radio Hour, where you can hear him telling great stories in his own voice. Richard Price, likened by Walter Kern to Raymond Chandler and Saul Bellow, is revered for his extraordinary ear for dialogue, or, as James Wood put it in his review of Lush Life, for his wonderful mind for dialogue, and for his unsurpassed ability to portray his native New York in its infinite diversity. His influence over what we now think of as stellar dialogue is so strong and so pervasive that young readers and viewers might be forgiven for failing to appreciate Price's profound originality. He changed our understanding, and now we think of his dialogue as the standard that we all try to meet. As Michael Connolly wrote in his New York Times book review of The Whites, it is, quote, a work of reportage as much as it is a work of fiction. That's what makes it important. It tells it like it is. It provides insight and knowledge, both rare qualities in the killing fields of the crime novel. Frequently using the police or crime novel as a frame, Price has explored large social issues from the crack epidemic to the changed economy of New York City in the first decade of this century, from the intricacies of family histories and dynamics in The Whites to the psychological toll of incarceration in The Night Of. His work is suffused with a near Shakespearean verbal inventiveness, or is it attentiveness, a sense of life's absurdity and humor, a surprising tenderness for the foibles and vulnerabilities of his characters, and an amazing accuracy when it comes to human behavior, from the smallest gestures on up. Writing good fiction is like being a safecracker. A writer is listening for the tiniest clicks. No writer listens better than Richard Price, and no writer better transforms that deceptively humble activity into superlative, compelling storytelling. He takes narratives with which we're familiar and returns them to us each time as something illuminating and surprising, enacting Ezra Pound's exhortation to make it new. It is a privilege and a great pleasure to welcome Richard Price.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. That was a privilege.
Oh, thank you. So Richard will read, but we thought we may chat a little first.
Yeah, a
tad bit. And I wondered maybe, one thing I wondered about, because we talked about it in my class, in one of my classes. If you took the dead bodies out of your fiction, you would win every prize. So I don't know if that's ever occurred to you, but that was something we were thinking about. We were thinking that actually what you do in providing in writing American society is so of such a high level, and you do get a lot of acclaim, but I feel as though I don't know if you get the big prizes. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I wondered if that was a choice, whether you thought this is what I want to write about, and this is the way I do it. I was wondering how the elements of genre, if you will, are important to you as a writer.
They're convenient and they're a pain in the ass, because the minute you use the word genre, a genre has rules. And in the crime mystery genre, you have a hero, or an anti-hero more likely. You have a bad guy or a group of bad guys, good, bad. You show off that nobody's really all good or really all bad a little bit, but there are rules, like you can't walk out of there without justice served. And you're sort of like moody Marlboro man, half Nordic, half Chandler-esque guy with the busted Venetian blinds and the bottle of old overcoat whiskey in his bottom drawer. I'll be honest, my first book that I would say I reported was The Clockers, and I was working on that from 1988 to came out in 92. And I had written 4 books which are based on my own human experience, but I was 32. I didn't have all that much to say. And I just felt like I wrote myself into a corner. And through a number of circumstances, I found myself more in the world than I'd ever been. I was haunted by my own bad cocaine habit of the early 80s. I wound up teaching at a daytop village, which is sort of a residential drug center, pro bono, teaching fiction writing to kids. And I found myself, after having written a movie, Sea of Love, I came out in '86 with Al Pacino, I found myself in the company of cops. And being with cops, there's no judgment or good, bad, indifferent. The stuff you see the stuff you're allowed to see of the world when you're with cops really pulled me out of my, my inner I Wonder As I Wander books. And I became addicted to going out into the field, so to speak, and finding a story larger than myself. And I loved it. I just loved it so much that I really wanted to write stories not about me, but I mean, every novel is an autobiography. I think crossword puzzles, you'll find autobiography in there from the person who made up the clues. I figured, well, there's enough of me just having a narrative voice here. And I also found, as my landscapes in books became more and more panoramic, like in Lush Life, it was about the Lower East Side as lived, not in the days of call it sleep, but in the days of, post-crack yuppification, and all the worlds involved in there. I mean, there were 7 separate planets, and I didn't want to write a travelogue. And then I realized, if you follow a criminal investigation, it provides you with a spine that you can ride through a very complex landscape like a white horse, because criminal investigations are orderly. This happens, they're chronological, they make sense. If you talk to this person, well, if you're going to talk to this person, then you need to talk to that person. And that person might be a Fujianese Chinese person walking by. That person might be an entrepreneur circa the early 2000s, opening up a hip restaurant. The third person might be a woman who lives in a housing project around the corner. Fourth person might be an old Talmudic scholar, davening on the Lower East Side. And I just got addicted to taking on landscapes and using the cleanness of a criminal investigation. So, and like I said, I didn't like or dislike cops. I mean, cops are like people,
They even are people.
They're like people, I'm joking, but I'm not a police buff. I don't automatically take the police point of view, in dramatic situations. You can't count on me to back up your opinion just because I write about. And gradually, and what happens is I just love that stuff, and I just love using that wherever I go. So there's bodies in it, and there's crime. But I don't want to protest too much, but how many great novels had crimes in them as their basis? Not to compare myself with anybody. Let's start with Dreiser. Sorry, I said I wouldn't do that. And then all of a sudden you got a reputation as a crime writer. And I wonder, well, whoa, wait, that's not it. I don't feel like I am, but I feel like I have to step away from that just to sort of write myself as not a genre writer, which I never felt I was. But
When you say step away, in what way step away?
Step away from crime and punishment.
Mm-hmm. You mean in your work or just
in my work? In my writing. But that means stepping away from something I love. I really have a blast writing crime and punishment. And you gotta like what you're writing. I mean, it's like a marriage, And you shouldn't marry this individual because it'll be good for you, like oatmeal is good for you. So it's a big compromise between my fun and but not. I don't want to get seduced into it. I'm going to show people that I can write about it. So the minute you start thinking about readers as opposed to yourself, you get kind of lost in the woods, and you can't figure out what do I really want to do. Time is tight. I'm 67. It's not like I have 50 years of writing ahead of me. So it's complicated. I'm wrestling with this.
But if you've never
every
felt,
day.
if you've never felt, I wanted to put to you because many years ago, the writer Colin Tobin said to me. It wasn't just to me; it was in a room full of people, but whatever. He said, "You can make up the characters, or you can make up the plot, but you can't make up both." Yeah. And I think a lot about that. And I think, do I agree with him? I don't know if I agree with him, but it's certainly true that any work of fiction is a balance between freedom and constraint. And when you say that the having a crime gives you a sort of white horse that you can ride through a landscape, it gives you a structure. It gives you constraint. And if those constraints are in fact liberating for you, you've written novels, as I said in the introduction, that are actually about all these very different bigger social issues. There may happen to be, corpses in them, or investigations in them, but it hasn't stopped you writing about anything. So when you say, I feel, why would you step away from it?
Because of what you just said. If it wasn't for bodies, I might be regarded more. But
you are I feel you are.
Well, that's the problem with me. It's like, no, stay with yourself. Yeah, but they're saying this and this about me. Well, I'll show them. And that's where you get screwed, where you screw yourself. Because it's like, I'm the type of person that reviews are dangerous to me. Much less so than ever before, but I'm easily influenced. Like in third grade, to be, well, he just follows this crowd. I really like to see Little Richard. It's a struggle every day. Part of the struggle is you have to really enjoy what you're doing to do it. And I write about certain people, and this is going to sound bizarre and very unliterary, but I write about the people I write about because I can make them funny, not to sacrifice the complexity of their humanity. I know how to make working class urban people. I know how to write about urban underdog. I know how to write about cops. I know how to write about put together families on a certain level of society. I just love being able to freedom to make their dialogue fly. And humor doesn't come out of ha-ha. Humor comes out of sheer recognition, and it's a surprise, and you find yourself grinning. I knew that. I didn't know I knew that until I read that. But once I read that, I recognized I knew that all along. So for me, it's the beauty of people being able to recognize certain elements of their personality and their situation. I don't know how to make patent engineers funny. I don't know how to make corporate lawyers funny. I don't know how to make brain surgeons funny. And, well, you should write about a higher level of society because then it would show you have this big span, blah, blah. I just have to have fun. If I'm not having fun, nobody's going to have fun. If I don't enjoy writing this, nobody's going to enjoy reading this.
I hear you.
Life is short.
I hear you. So you've said it. You've said before that that place is a character for you, and that you start with place, or that place is one of the fundamental elements. And I wonder, given the sort of breadth and range of in a way that the thematically of the subjects that you've written about, whether you choose a place with did you choose, say, for Lush Life, did you choose the Lower East Side because
every place is a choice.
Okay.
Because let's say you have 3 key characters in a story. One of those characters is location. I'd like to know, going into the book, at least I have one of my characters down cold. So I will always write about urban environments. Look, I mean, if I grew up by the sea, I'd be writing sea books. If I grew up in the mountains, it would all take place in the mountains. If I grew up in the Great Plains, et cetera, et cetera. I grew up in the city. And I love it. You know, you gotta have, for all the anxiety and hair pulling that goes through making a book from beginning to end, you gotta love what you're doing. You gotta love the people you're writing about. Even if whatever you're making them blacker than black in terms of, you know, devil souls, you gotta love them in some way. And I gotta love my world, and I gotta love my people. I mean, when I was younger, when I was writing my first 4 books, I was in my 20s. They're very deep books. I started feeling, well, I don't want a reputation as this these, them, those dialogue writer. I'm gonna show them, I'm gonna write about the Spanish Armada. You know, and I'm gonna do it so, wow, he can write about anything. Never happened, so, I mean, I was probably drunk at the time, but it's all about love, you know. I'm sounding like a broken record, but it's a long haul of book. You know, it's like getting married. You gotta love the hell out of the person that you're joining with for a number of years.
So there are lots of things I want to ask you, but maybe what about starting with dialogue, and to what extent is that just something you can do in your sleep? To what extent is that something that you work at relentlessly? To what extent is it actually just reported speech?
It's not. Listen, you know, I always liked making up people talking to each other. I remember when I was 6 years old, there was a girl I had a crush on in first grade, and I would never talk to her in a billion years, but I would lay in bed before I went to sleep, and she was being attacked by a space monster, and she was going, "Help, Richard, help." You know, I go, "I'll save you." But then I would have a big dialogue with the space monster. "Don't you touch Frida Jankalowicz." "I don't touch anybody I want." "No, you're and we start arguing, and Frida would go, "Hello," you know, I'm drifting out in space. I just get so caught up, and I would say this, and the monster would say that. So it's just this intuitive thing that I just liked. And I was intimidated by Warner's English grammar handbook. It was the bane of my adolescence. And I just had an ear, like some people have, you know, always compared to being a runner. You can't teach anybody. People run fast or they don't. You can fine tune, you can shave like a second or two at best off their times, but you can't teach someone to run fast. And with dialogue, you just have to have an ear, you know, and that's the one gift I was given is I have an ear. I remember it was actual creative writing class in high school. Nobody had a creative writing class at that point. And I had to write a story, and I tried to make people real, and I kind of used the word damn, like, you know, goddamn or damn. And the paper came back to me, and it was hemorrhaging red from the English teacher. "This is not necessary to use language like this." You know, so I was always loved the profane, and I always loved the music, that somehow I could put music into dialogue in a way that I don't know what to compare it to. It was like jazz for me.
Yeah.
It was. I mean, my whole rhythm came out of. And Lorraine Adams, who spoke earlier today, has heard this a billion times because we live together. She's my wife, and I'm her husband, and so she hears me. Oh God, that one again. But you know, the way I found my voice, and finding your voice is the most important thing I think for a novelist. And because your narrative voice is a close cousin to dialogue. how intimate is the narrator going to get to the characters? How vernacular is it going to be? Lorraine called it close third person, and that's pretty much what it is. And I try to find my voice, and when I was in high school in the Bronx, I always liked social realism because I don't know anybody in Jane Austen's world. I don't know anybody in John Steinbeck's world. So it's not just like English, I don't know anybody in Dickens' world. But when I started reading James Baldwin, Richard Wright, a couple of other people that were James T. Farrell, Studs Lonigan, people that were writing about things I walk on and I see and I breathe, I found myself. And it taught me that my experience is valid grounds for literature. That was a big breakthrough. However...
And that was in high school?
Yeah. However, the problem was with social realist novelists, for the most part, some of the names I have given you excluded from this, is that's writing to make a point, and it's kind of like sawing wood, one fact, another fact, somebody makes a statement that's kind of like proving the point or the social humanitarian point that the author's trying to make. There's no magic in it. It was just like taking dull photographs. Mm. But I clung to that because I recognized, I know that world, so yeah. Then I read a book that probably very few people in this room have read. It's called Last Exit to Brooklyn. And it was by a writer, who's a beat writer named Hubert Selby. Hubert Selby also wrote about, God, am I that boring? Hubert Selby also wrote about the streets, wrote about Brooklyn, the Red Hook part of Brooklyn, I think, or Bay Ridge somewhere. But he was a child of the beat. He was a beat. He was a bebop artist with words. So he wrote about the same thing, but he had this like rhythm, this like da 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 da, and he just lifted all the concrete out of the cement of a social realist, and it was like he was playing an instrument. And I found a way not to write like I was using, a hammer and tongs. I was using a saxophone. And so when I found my voice like that, it was so intimate, and there was no line between dialogue and prose, and it just lifted me off the ground and really allowed me to get into my dialogue and not worry too much, to tell in a way to tell a full story.
So, again,
I don't even think I answered the question.
Well, you did. So I'm curious. So that's what. I mean, where along the line did you say this is what I'm gonna do? This is. I mean, somewhere between the space monster dialogue in your bed at night and
when I was 8.
Early.
I mean, fantasy-wise, when I was 8. Realistic-wise, not until I graduated college and had a choice. My grandfather was a factory worker in Brooklyn. Sorry, you got to hear all this stuff. My grandfather was a factory worker in Brooklyn, was a Russian immigrant. And like every Jew in Russia, he was studying to be a rabbi. I don't think there's one person from Russia who came over that was Jewish who wasn't studying to be a rabbi. But anyways, he was a foreman in a chrome plating factory. But he was very literate. He read the Russians in Russian, and he came over, and he was an actor and a stagehand with the Lower East Side Yiddish Theater, and he would write poems, and they would be published in this mimeograph thing for the Brooklyn YMHA, which is like this. But there would be poems on that would be mimeographed like this, and it's stapled, and huge circulation, I think 40, 50 copies. And I just remember when I was 8, seeing my grandfather's poem. And even at 8, after it's kind of corny there, Gramps. But nonetheless, it had its name, it had his name at the bottom. And my father revered my grandfather.
It was his father.
Yeah, his father. And I looked at my father, looking at my grandfather. I said, I want some of that look too. So I decided I was going to be a writer right then. But it was always a fantasy. And, you know, like when you get older, you want to have a specialty, like the best dancer, the best hair, you know, the math brain. And I just wanted to be known as the writer. And which involved pinching my nose in a library at a table where there was a couple of girls, and I went like this, hoping some of them would come up to me and say, "Are you suffering?" Never happened. But my nose really did get narrower. And, you know, I went to Cornell, I got a degree in labor relations, but I took all my electives in creative writing. And I really, really wanted to be a writer. And my father said, well, look, you know, you can write in your spare time. It could be like your hobby, you know, but once you have a serious job, you can write on the weekends. And then came time, what are you going to do for graduate school? And so I applied to including Harvard. I got in for MAT in teaching. And that lasted about 6 minutes. And the one Master of Fine Arts school I got into was Columbia. And I felt like I had no right to go. I was working class. I felt like I had no right to go. My father had a little hosiery store. And he got so exasperated by me Hamleting all across the floor. I don't know what to do. And my father finally said, oh, Jesus Christ, go to your stupid creative writing program. If it doesn't work out 2 years from now, you'll go to law school, big deal. And I just remember like saying, literally, gee, Dad, you mean it? And once I went to graduate school, it was great because I was surrounded by 12 people around a seminar table, and I met once a week, and all 12 of those people, none of them went to law school. We're all here. None of them were pre-med. None of them went to business school. Meanwhile, everybody's friends from college were now on their way, you know, with a real job. And the worst thing in the world when you're a young writer, even if you're determined, is somebody saying you're a writer. Somebody says, oh, well, what have you written? Well, I'm working on a Spanish Armada novel, but, you know, I'm waiting for my translator. You know, I want to put it in 17th century Spanish, and I don't know Spanish. So instead of saying, well, what do you write? I say, well, I'm in the Master of Fine Arts program at Columbia. It put your ego on hold, and it gave you at least 2 years where you weren't mortified by wanting to be a writer. And I got very lucky. I published a book when I was 24. So
were you still in the program when you?
This is the other thing. It's really embarrassing. I was in the program. I left for a year to go to Stanford because they had a little fellowship, which Columbia didn't.
Which they still have?
Yeah, I mean, I got a $1,500 fellowship, which at that time was, you're in the money. That's cabbage. I came back from Columbia. I was taking a class or two, you know, fiction, etc. And I published my first novel, The Wanderers.
Then everybody hated you.
Well,
No?
probably. But I refused to quit the program. And I published another novel, and I was still in the program, and it was driving everybody batshit. And people said, what are you making fun of us? The teachers hated me. Richard Yates was my teacher. And when he did the roll call, he said, who's Price? Oh, you're our $1 billion bonus baby. You know, but what I finally realized, the reason why I stayed in that program, because I wanted a master's degree in fine arts. I was the first person to ever go to college in my family, and I wasn't even thinking about, I wanted that MFA because I was going to have checks printed with my, on top, it would say Richard Price, MFA. You know, it was just a working class thing that I didn't even recognize until years after I finally graduated.
Did you have the checks printed?
No.
It's
I
not
did have a
too
friend
late.
who put PhD on his checks.
It's not too late. You still could.
Yeah, I guess.
Uh-huh. What? But so and then so by the time you were at university, you knew you wanted to go straight. I mean, the story is you wanted to go straight on and be a writer, and when you wrote The Wanderers, did you Because the story, the official story is that you wrote one chapter, as it were, that was then published. Dan Halpern published
in Antaeus.
in Antaeus.
The class hated it, and Dan Halpern, who's the editor, who became the head of the writing program for a while, and who's a very well-known and well-regarded editor, has his own imprimatur at HarperCollins.
Echo.
Echo,
Yeah.
right. He came up to me. The class hated it because the first chapter of The Wanderers was about an all-out gang war between an Italian gang and a black gang, and they had the Italians win. And it was the most politically incorrect thing to do. And teacher was a psychopath who hated the fact that he had to teach these people half his age.
Was this Richard Yates or somebody else?
No, yeah, Richard. No. It was W.B. Yates. No, it was this guy. I don't want to say his name, but he was the nastiest person and charismatic, very funny. So you really didn't realize, you have internal injuries until you went home. But he led this wolf pack on this, and everybody trashed it in the class. And it was the first thing I ever read in a writing program. And, I can't hardly remember how I felt. I was kind of like startled, and I believed everything. But I also felt like, oh well. And at the end of the class, Dan Halpern, who's taking a fiction class just because he knew he was going to be an administrator, and he wanted to see how the whole writing program worked and all the seminars. He came up to me and he said, I want to publish, I have a magazine and I want to publish that story. And I said, how much? I didn't even blink. I said, how much? And he looked at me and he said, well, we don't, it's a literary quarterly. We don't have a lot of money. We don't pay anybody. And I went, oh. I thought, when I said how much, I thought, how much do I have to pay for him to publish it? And he said, well, you will get 7 free copies. I went, oh, okay. Yeah. And I couldn't believe it. That was my first class. But it reminded me, Paul Schrader, filmmaker, once had a movie that opened at the Locarno Film Festival. And Locarno Film Festival has the largest outdoor screen in the world. And the film was The Comfort of Strangers. It was based on the Ian McEwan book. And he said, wow, how did it go? He said, well, they started booing in the opening credits. And they never stopped until the screen went dark, an hour and a half later. I said, oh my God, how'd you feel? He said, I felt they were wrong. And I wasn't that bulletproof, but there's a little part of me that went,
In the workshop.
Not a very little part of me that went,
But it's important to have that part.
Well, it's like anybody who wants to be anything in the arts as a career, you need insane confidence, because it's a loser's option. Someday I'm going to be driving a cab, but I'm really a novelist. But at least I'm making a good $150 a week while I write this novel for 10 years. I mean, you really got to believe in yourself to put up with all the crap, that you have to do, so you can buy. The most precious thing a writer can buy is time. Mm-hmm. But I don't know if I didn't get published so young. If it took 10 more years to publish my first book, I don't know if I would have had the stamina. I think I was very lucky to publish early, simply because with my upbringing, I don't know if I could take it. Visiting my Cornell roommates, one guy's now, vice president at, some pudding company, or, another guy's...
What's a pudding company?
The Jell-O pudding, right? And Cosby was his client, Dylan Cosby. Pudding pops. And, but people were doing like real things, and I don't know if I would have avoided every one of them. I would have been so, oh, Price, you still writing that book? How's it going? Well, I'm flying in my taxi. I get, that Harry Chapin song. I wanted to be some kind of like a pilot, but now he's driving a taxi, but he still gets so high when he's stoned. It's like that, you know,
Right.
I didn't want to be like this.
You didn't want to be that guy.
Yeah, I just,
No. But so then how did writing for film, how did that come about? And how is that different for you?
well, it's very different. And, you know, I've done a lot of film, and now I'm doing a lot of TV. And the difference is, when you write a novel, it's all yours. Every decision, every word, every comma is yours. When you're working on a TV show, it's a collaborative medium, and you're just one of a number of people. So it's like you write the script, and they're going to change the script for expediency's sake, or the budget's too big, or we lost the main actor, we have another actor, but he doesn't want to play this type of guy, change the guy. So you write the script, but, you know, said ad nauseum, it's not a building, it's a blueprint. The building is not going to be the blueprint. The building is going to be the building, depending on what kind of materials they can get, how the economy goes. Well, we can't afford all these windows. So when you write a movie, no matter how good it is, it's never the movie that's made. And because you don't have any control over it, you know, you're the first one in, and everybody lands on top of you in the decision-making process. And so, I mean, you could be Shakespeare, you know, if they had movies back then. And you got this great story about, you know, this boy and this girl, they go crazy for each other, you know, blah, 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 and their families are fighting. And that's great. But you know what? Steven Seagal wants to play the Capulet boss. You know, we got a good shot at getting Brando for the Montague. And these kids, I know they're supposed to be 13, but there's this 22-year-old hot actress named Amber Heard. And we really want to, you know, we think she would help the movie. And, well, Denzel wants to play Romeo. So we got to really age up these characters, you know. It's going to happen. It's not your
Right.
choice. You're at the mercy. So when a movie or a TV show is a big success, and somebody comes to you and says, I loved your movie, I feel like they're congratulating 8 people between me and them. Because it wasn't my movie, it was my script.
Right.
And for a sense of pride and a sense of like really wanting to be an artist unfettered by compromise. Unfortunately, it's novels, you know.
Right. You got the
And
freedom.
bluntly, honestly speaking, you can make money with, you know, I mean, there's no such thing as free money, but you can make money doing the other stuff. And sometimes if you get good at it, it can be like crack. You know, you get so addicted to the pace, and especially with TV, you write something, bang, 2 weeks later it's on. You know, you could, you know, when you're writing a novel, you could have cobwebs going from your forehead to the paper. It would be like that Dickensian birthday cake, and nobody would know. Hey, see Price around? I think he died. You know, no, he's working on a novel. So you get addicted just metabolically. And frankly, writing a novel is so freaking isolating. And so that's one of the other reasons why I love reporting the novel, going out. That was my social life, hanging out with all these psychopaths and people. And at least I was talking to somebody instead of sitting in my room all day, like, you know, like I was in a garret. And when you're making a movie, it's like you're dealing with people. You know, and it was like anti-venom for isolation. I mean, it has nothing to do with the ultimate finished product of the art, but it's like, what's hard for me to come to terms with is writing is what I do. It's a calling, but it's not my entire life. And the older I get, novels used to be, I was pretty unhappily in a domestic situation. I had 2 kids I loved, but I just felt very sort of not where I was supposed to be in my heart. not with the kids, but with the person I was married to and the world that we found ourselves in. And one of the superficial, but so all of my self-esteem and all my sense of satisfaction when it wasn't dealing with my children was tied up in the reception of my books. Mm. And my books became life or death for me in a very unhealthy way. So my life has changed, and I feel like, yeah, I love to write, I'll always write, but my life is so much more than writing. Writing is, it's not like if I don't write today, I'll die. If I open up a paper and there's a review of something, I live and die by that review. I don't feel it anymore. It's not like I don't give a damn, but I kind of don't give a damn.
That's great. That goes back to the to what you were saying, the Paul Schrader moment, right?
Yeah.
That's in a way that's where
I just feel like
be.
If people like it, I'm happy. If people don't like it, I'm not happy. I'm sort of unhappy. But it's, I had an old shrink that said it's too bad evolution hasn't allowed humans to live 400 years because it takes about 380 years to figure this shit out. And, it's like I'm having one of these, now I'm going, aha, I get it. Everything's in its proper place. No, I wish I could live another 100. Lorraine believes in we're going to be cryogenically frozen, like Walt Disney and Ted Williams. And we're going to come back, fresher and stronger, but we're all our wisdom. I don't know. I'm just going to play it minute by minute.
I'm wondering, would you be willing to read a little for us now?
Maybe. Okay, I'm going to read what I discovered, unfortunately and unhappily, is I love to read. I love to read more than people love to listen. So I'm going to read something pretty short.
That's paradoxical. Or contradictory. That's contradictory.
That's like a Marx Brothers thing. Why a paradox? Sorry. Innuendo. Husband comes in the door. I go out. No, I got that all messed up. Your husband leaves. I go innuendo. Sorry. Never mind. Oh, that was really tedious. I'm sorry. Speak, O tablet. Okay. This is from The End of the Whites. I also learned never read a passage that involves two people, more than two people, because nobody knows who the hell's talking about who, and it takes a year to set it up, and people have completely forgot to set up. And as you're reading, you see people doing like this with their phones. Oh, look, I got a new friend on Facebook. This is from the end of, and it's basically a funeral oration. One of the main characters in The Whites is a retired detective named John Pavlicek. And Pavlicek is a very powerful presence who's kind of the natural leader of any group of individuals he's with. And Pavlicek is now retired. He's made a lot of money. And he had a son who was a total screw-up when he was a teenager. And then he finally started straightening himself out. And then he found out he was diagnosed as having a leukemia at 21 that normally people get when they're in their late 60s. And he dies. So this is, and his name is John Jr. And I'm going to leave out as much description as I can. So it's a whole bunch of cops at this funeral. And I'm going to refer to the dead son. Junior apparently had been utterly indifferent to the notion of any kind of God. And so Pavlicek, no Bible beater himself, passed on having any kind of religious celebrant and instead turned the program over to his son's friends, who served up a half a dozen well-spoken homages, an acoustical duet on I'll Fly Away, and a teary solo of Angels Among Us, sung by a young woman who had been the closest thing Junior had had to a girlfriend in the last year of his life. When the woman returned to her seat, a retired detective from Bronx Homicide, not on the program, spontaneously got up and sang an a cappella version of Eric Clapton's Tears in Heaven, which had half the room weeping like babies. And I'm jumping, and it ended with the old African-American father of the funeral director doing a soft gospel singing in his reedy voice. He was singing seemingly singing directly to Junior's father as he closed out the concert with "The Battle Is Not Yours." And then it was his time, Pavlicek rising from the front row, giving his back to the room as he silently leaned over the coffin. This is one of the observers. Billy could hear him whispering something to his son, but too indistinctly for anyone to make out. Then finally turning to the assembled, the expression on his face near homicidal. "I don't know if anybody came here to celebrate John Jr.'s life, but I certainly didn't," he said, gripping the podium as if he wanted to crush it. "I am here before you. I am here among you to rage and curse God for the arbitrarily murdering fuck that he is. Not that I'm the first parent ever to feel that way, and to grant myself at least one afternoon where suicide would be logistically difficult." You know, you read the papers after a young man dies in this city. Someone's always saying, he was just starting to get his life together. He was just talking about going back to school, getting his GED, getting a job, talking about being a real father to his daughter, talking about getting away from the hood, about enlisting, about marrying his fiancée. He was just about to do this. He was just about to do that. All these justs, whether they were true or not, because they all died young, and just was all they had. Tomorrow was all they had. And the same could be said for my boy. He was just about to finish his schooling. He was just about to find his own way in the world. Just about to show me the man that now he'll never get to be. The man that over the years would have null and voided every hardship, every heartache I've ever endured in my life. You want to hear what a great kid he was? How his heart was pure gold? How he loved life, loved people, loved a challenge, all that boilerplate, etc., etc. For those of you who want to hear all of that, consider it said. The fact of the matter was that he was just about to be, and now he's not. There's some people in this room right now, Pavlicek said, who gave 20 years or more to the job, myself included. We've seen it all, handled it all, and when a young person dies, we've all walked up the stairs, knocked on the doors, and delivered the news between us to an army of parents. We've caught them on their way to the floor, carried them into the bedroom or living room, then gone into their kitchens and brought them water. Over the years, an ocean of water, glass by glass by glass. And so, after all of that, we think we understand what it must feel like to be one of those parents. But we don't. We can't. I still can't. But I'm getting there. Thank you for coming. I feel like I'm saying that to the audience. Thank you for. It's just short, you know. It gets pretty corny after that, so I just a voice thing.
So this novel, The Whites, you published initially under a pseudonym.
See, well, that's where the problem gets deeper. I needed money, and my agent, Lynn Nesbitt, I didn't want to write any more screenplays because they became, all anybody wanted was a Marvel hero adaptation. They weren't even interested in DC Comics. And here I am in my late 50s, early 60s, and I'm auditioning to write the screenplay, you know, about the platinum neuromancer, you know, the turquoise surfer, you know, and I'm too old for Marvel Comics, but the executives I was having to pitch to, is another word I hate, were all like younger than my daughters, and so I had to. It was humiliating. I was saying, well, I think the blind nutsack should, you know, the surfer with the, you know, the guy with the telescope in his head, you know, I think he should, you know, and then here comes Fardo, you know, the villain, you know, his superpower. I don't know if they hear. And they go, wow, that's great. Writing down everything I said. And at the end of the thing, at the end of the spiel, I'd give them all my ideas. I could hear the scritching of pencils on the other side, writing down every iota of thought I had on the subject. And at the end of this, I was winded. It was like an hour. I was going, phew, and it's fantastic, fantastic. Oh, fuck it, who cares? I got a job. And it's like, we should really get him on the phone with Mitch. Who the hell's Mitch? It's their boss. They have no power to say yes or no. They only have the power to say no or maybe. So, wow, you got to talk to Mitch. So I got to set up for Mitch. So I talk another hour on the phone with Mitch a week later. Mitch is going, brilliant, brilliant. I heard you were a genius, but here it is, in living color. And I want to tell you something. You just know you need to talk to Sarah. And we go up the pike and up the pike. And here I am dancing like, a marionette with a busted string, to these children. And I went all the way up the chain to, Allison. And turns out they gave the gig to somebody else who'd never written a screenplay before, was 24 years old, and would do whatever they said for a fraction of the price. I said, that's it. And it went, you asked me what time it is, and you're going to have the whole history of Boulevard Watch Factory. So I go into Lynn Esmond, my agent said, I'm losing my mind, I'm really behind on my bills. And she says, well, why don't you write a novel under a pseudonym? Like John Banville and Benjamin Black. Or there was like this wave of like, hi, it's me, but it's not me. I'm going to have more fun. And so I said, I can get you as much money as you would get for a screenplay. I said, great, I'll do it. Because I'd written, so I figured out some kind of crime book. That was going to be the way. And she said, oh, by the way, if it takes more than 3 months to write this thing, it's not worth it. I said, got it. Cut to 4 years later. The Whites, the end. My pants fell off. I'm all bald on this side of my head from pulling my hair out. I mean, how do you write down? I mean, you write the way you write. No, write stupider. Write glibber. And you just write the way you write. And so that was one hell of a 3 month, So, and the book came out, and I thought it was kind of a quote-unquote genre book, and so I really wanted to keep the pen name because I didn't want this book to be judged in comparison with one of my more serious books. I didn't want to.
But how did it feel? How did it feel different to you? I'm just curious because
it followed the rules. The thing of all genres is that there are rules. And if you break the rules, people don't know what the hell this is. They don't know what to call a book. Is it a thriller? Is it a philosophical meditation? On human mortality? Is it So I didn't. So I said, fine. That was part of the easy part. This has to happen. But how do you write less complex characters? How do you write? If you don't believe in good guys and bad guys, if what you cherish, like every novelist should cherish, is the gray, not the black or the white, but the complexity of every biped on Earth, but I was worried that because it fit the conventions of the genre, let me keep the pen name just like but everybody knew it was me. So it was like pulling a rabbit out of a glass hat. Here he is, don't tell anybody. Harry Brandt, what's the price? So it's ridiculous.
Because didn't it said in the reviews even?
Well, what happened is then I started reading reviews and it was like, whoa, hey, this is a good book. And I said, why did I ever put it, But it's a lesser book. I honestly think it's a lesser book. As good as it might be and as good as it was received, I think it's a lesser book. Because it's about solving, they're the guys that did it. It's like crime is the only genre where the reader is in competition with the writer. Because they want to outsmart the writer. And I don't know the difference between that and word jumbles or, Friday New York Times crossword puzzles. You know, it's supposed to be like you just surrendered to a book. But
I feel like I surrendered to this book as I surrendered to the others, and it's true that there's a sort of it's plotted.
Mm-hmm.
It's plotted.
you know,
right?
the thing about a crime novel, it's got to have a revelation.
Yeah.
And I hate revelations, and I hate answers, because life is open ended. You know, it's just there are no answers. The crime genre requires, if not immortal answers, solutions, you know, to the mystery. And hopefully you got there before the reader did. Mm-hmm. And it's no way to run an airline. You know, who the hell wants to write like that when the whole world is out there in all its unanswerableness?
Yeah, but humanly, the characters are there in all their unanswerableness.
I try. No, I mean, but the point is, you know, this time I really went right to the genre, and that's why
Right.
it was more of like, you know, I killed myself on it, but it was more like well, you know, what do I do now? Let me consult the guidebook, you know.
Right.
So,
And in a minute, we'll open it up to questions from the audience, but I wanted to ask you also about The Night Of, which you are not just a writer, the main writer of, but also a producer, and so it's your project. It was your
yeah,
project.
I wrote all the episodes.
In a way completely differently, perhaps, from some of your other television.
Yes and no, because the co-creator was also the director. So things will get changed according. He had more power than I did, so he's not only changing things on the set, determining on the circumstances, but he's changing things because he's also a writer. He's a screenwriter. So the worst thing in the world is for a writer to write for a writer, because they're never going to respect what you wrote. And things happen. I conceive a character a certain way, but he wants to cast someone that's going to play an entirely opposite way, and it's his decision. No, it's better to hire this individual and let her or him do his thing. It'll serve the story so much better. I mean, I love what you wrote, but you know, now we're dealing with putting flesh on the page. So it's, yeah, it was mine, but there's always this element of like, no, you shouldn't. What did you do? What did you do? But then there's also stuff that you didn't write that's in there that would go, wow, you really nailed that. I didn't even touch that. You know, so it's a give and take. At best, it's a give and take. At worst, it's all take. You know, and you go home with elephant ear, inside out pockets, and you know, feeling angry, and I'll never do that again until the next time.
I realized that there was a thing way back that I wanted to ask you. There were two paths in a wood, and it was about research, and how you research, how you do your research, and you know, you sort of said it was an excuse to spend all this time with people, but it involves calling people up and going.
You know, sometimes the things you see and hear, the most non sequitur things you hear, and the most meaningless gestures, it's like heroin of insight. And I don't do research, I hang out. And but because I don't want myself, I'm not going to go back to, you know, my own life, you know, like somebody once said, you know, a lot of post-World War II American fiction is vaguely unhappy in Connecticut. I was vaguely unhappy in the Bronx. So I don't want to do that. I don't want to write about myself, except, you know, how I filter in through my sensibility. And I had notebooks, I'd scribble this down, scribble that down. It'd be a pile like, you know, Rain Man. And I never look at the notebooks, but by and large, because I figure whatever I remember is the important things. If I don't remember it, looking up my indecipherable handwriting is going to, like, You know,
Right, what's the point?
okay, what did the guy say? Because I don't know if this word is gosh or damn. You know, it's not. You know, you go out there, and you don't even know what you're looking for. I don't go out there with a hit list of questions or goals. I go out there just to be with these people, and it's like you think it was a nothing day or a nothing real waste of time. And then 4 o'clock in the morning, you shoot upright in bed and you go, oh my God. What did he say? Oh, and all of a sudden it's like link, 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 you know. And I love it. I just love hanging. You know, it's part of writing. But like I said, once again, it's not like you have a goal of like these, you know, big game animals you want to bag. You're just going out there to see what happens. The danger of that is because it's so addicting and it's so much, for me, it was so much fun. I feel like I'm a student, I'm a perpetual student, and just talking to anybody on the street in any situation, I feel like I'm learning. I know this sounds a little goody-goody, but it's true. The danger is you can get so addicted to this game that you forget to write. Or you feel like, no matter how, you know, it's like trying to drink the ocean with a colander. There's just too much world out there, and it's really hard to stop. And I remember when I was 2 years on the street for Clockers, my editor said, well, that's great. I was telling him all this amazing stuff. He said, well, let me ask you a question. What's the first sentence of the book? And I immediately had a speech to fact. I said, well, I don't know enough about the welfare system. I don't know about the public defender. You know, just start writing. You know, it's like you're a lifeguard who's a little bit afraid of sea creatures, so you make yourself so muscle bound with experience that you can't swim. Just stop pumping iron, stop filling up notebooks, just write. You know, listen, anybody can go out and observe, but it's like taking all this life, and now you got to shape it into some baggy but logical beholding of a world where, you know, everything out there is like chaos and pinballs. And so the art is taking all that stuff and molding it, you know, into a story. And the most dangerous thing you can do that I ever done is I start writing, never ever go back out on the street. Guaranteed, somebody's going to say something that's going to make you doubt everything you've ever known. You know, it's fine, you're fine. Get away before it's too late. So you write in, and then you start talking to somebody, and it's so dangerous. You know, like in 7th grade science, they try to teach you about supersaturation. So they have a beaker of water, and then it's clear water, and then they drop something in, it turns violet. That's what going out there. All of a sudden, it's clear water. You go out there one time too many, and it's ink, and you can't see. You lose all your confidence. It's like being bold, but being fragile, too, because you got to protect yourself.
Thank you. I'm thinking that we should see if people in the audience would like to ask a question or two.
I would just want to say before people ask questions, ask a question. I mean, and it's happened once too often. People get up and they have something to say, at which point after 10, 15 minutes you go, what's the question? And then they ask some question that they never meant to ask, just to couch it as a question. But it makes everybody a captive audience. So I would love to take questions. Yes? I'm sorry.
Hang on, there's a mic coming.
Hi, first of all, thanks for being here. I appreciate it. Can you talk about how your approach to writing changes when you're writing for the screen as opposed to when you're writing for a novel, for a page?
Well, the question was, what's the difference between writing on the page? Screenwriting and novels. have language sentences. Novels have prose. Screenplays have no prose. They're like telegrams to the director. This guy does this, she says that, he does this, she does that. End of scene. Next scene, 2 sentences set up the location, the mood. Okay, boy, blah, blah, blah. Girl, blah, 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 blah. Boy, bloody blah. They start throwing kitchen appliances at each other. Cut. Next scene, exterior, night. Interior, day. You know, but it's like Post-it notes.
I guess my question was more development-wise, if I can use that term, which comes from TV and filmmaking. When you're going into conceptualizing and developing a screenplay versus conceptualizing and developing a book, I guess your approach to plotting and to structure in that way, rather than the actual writing of a scene versus
well, I
a
think
page.
what happens is the difference in consciousness is the clock. When you're writing a novel, there's no narrative clock. When you're writing a script or a television pilot, you have, if you go over, say, an hour and 50 minutes, you're dead. If you go over an hour, if you go over 55 minutes, you're dead. So you're writing like you would one eye on the clock. Well, it's page 40, so you have to be exactly conscious of where you are vis-a-vis the length of the project you're writing. Novels, I mean, you could write a 9,000-page book. The only requirement is that it's compelling and readable and says something. And you could be more amorphous when you're writing novels, because you can have 2 people sitting on a bench talking for 20 pages. And once again, the conversation has to be scintillating or interesting, at least. You can't do that for film, because it's not a written medium, it's a visual medium, it's a 2-dimensional medium. You hear and you see. You know, like I said, there's no I wander as I wander in writing a script. You have to know your story, and there's no room for, you have to know before you start, because you're in such a small phone booth, exactly what the story is. Because you can't wander off after 20 pages and decide you don't like your main character in the screenplay. They'll kill you. And a novel, some people just write novels from sentence to sentence, see where it takes them. But time is money, and there's a lot of people waiting for a script, and it's got to be tight, crisp, and go where it's going, up front. And that's all the difference in the world.
Thank you.
Do you feel it feels as though the script writing is has more restrictions on you? I just think, do you feel as if you can get your narrative voice into a character's mouth or not?
I can, but once again, it's my voice. But who knows what the ultimate interpretation that the actor will have, or who the actor will be, or what the director wants, what the studio wants. I mean, that's what I'm saying. You're the first person in, and everybody piles on top of you. And at the end of the day, you're lucky if you feel you recognize half of what you wrote in the final product.
But if you know that going in, you're okay with that?
Well, like I said, no such thing as free money. I mean, you want to make money, this is what you got to do. We were
Is it
joking.
painful, though? Is it painful? Or do you just get past that?
It used to be painful when I was younger, because I was so excited by working in movies and working with, people that I've watched since I was a teenager on screen. The older I get, I'm more philosophical. This is what I do for money. Because my name is on it, I'll do the best I can do. But I know the lay of the land. I'm not going to get my knickers in a twist. This is what they're going to do. And I have an agreement with myself. If this happened to me, because movies, you can write the best thing in the world, but they have a change of studio heads. and there's a whole new slate. All of a sudden, like when I did something for CBS, they decided halfway through the series, CBS does not want dramas anymore. Dramas aren't making it. Every drama has to be converted to action. What am I, like Hopalong Cassidy? I mean, it's like, Jesus. You don't want me to write action. You can't tell me midstream, more bells and whistles. I'm not going to give you bells and whistles to begin with. I forgot the question.
No, it was just.
Well, am I good with that? I realize I want certain things in life. I want things in life for my family. I want things in life for myself. I want to enjoy myself. Everything's a compromise. If I want certain things, there are certain things I have to do. It's still writing. Whatever I write, no matter how much I complain, and nobody feels sorry for the poor little rich girl, but no matter how much I complain, I'm still writing. I'm getting paid for writing. It might not be what I would like to write, but I'll make it into something I want to write. I mean, it's called first draft. After that, it's hell. Because first draft of a script. Yes. Somebody.
I was wondering if you could describe how your reading has changed over time, because I know that you mentioned that once you discovered more New York and urban-centric writers that you really found your voice, but now that maybe you have a better sense of what your voice is than you did then, if your reading has expanded to like other perspectives, and if that's maybe like...
Has my reading broadened? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it has, because I don't need them anymore. I mean, I'm the one that the ones coming up read. In that sense, look, if you're looking for somebody that reminds me of you, if you were like me, I'm the guy, among others. My reading has always been eclectic. Not all reading is for inspiration. It's because you love to read. When I'm reading to find myself, that's more hunting. I'm not hunting anymore. I'm reading for pleasure. What? So what are you reading? Oh, what am I reading? Sorry, I didn't. Gee.
Is that Spanish Armada there?
No, yeah, no. I read a hot book about Sir Francis Drake, and then decided to follow up on it. I don't know what I'm reading. I'm reading everything because of ebooks. If you have a really good cup of coffee, or God forbid, 5 milligrams of Adderall, and you go to Amazon, you're gonna wind up buying 7 books in about 7 minutes. You're gonna read maybe one. You're gonna read maybe a couple of pages of the other one, and you're gonna look at the other 5 and say, why the hell did I buy this? What's this about? And so, ebooks has kind of ruined my concentration. I mean, there's so much I want to read. So I could be reading anything, but I'm also reading 4 other books, and I probably never finish any of them. And and there's a sadness also, is that when you get older, you realize you're never going to read the writers you're always meant to read. I mean, you're never going to read a lot of the writers you're always meant to read, because you don't want to read them. Your rhythm, your metabolism. There's certain books you love when you're in your 20s, and it's like learning a foreign language. Your brain is open to this book at this time in your life. And as you get older, I know what I like, I know what I want. I know what makes me curious. So God help me, I'll probably never read The Mayor of Casterbridge. I'll never read a million books that I'm embarrassed to say I haven't read. I want to, but time's short. A lot of books out there, and it's kind of like a depressing thought. Yes.
Claire mentioned John le Carre. I wonder if you could name a few other writers who, like you, have kind of walked with a genre and yet gone outside it wildly too.
Are there writers in that particular genre?
No, not in that particular genre, but writers like you who
genre.
Writers like you who've really have a tricky and great relationship with genre and have sort of gone beyond it in kind of great ways. I'd say Le Carre's one and you're another. Are there others, do you think?
I'm sure there are. I can't think of any right now, but I'm sure there are. I mean, listen, Joseph Conrad wrote spy books. I mean, if you want to think about it, Dostoevsky wrote probably one of the best murder mysteries, although you know up front who did it, which is what I prefer. I mean, look at the science fiction being written by Doris Leff. I mean, there are people that use genres, but they're using genres. It's not like they're dyed-in-the-wool, loyal, card-carrying members of that genre. Would you call Cormac McCarthy a Western writer? It's...
Well, speaking more narrowly, what about writers working as you do with, police and dead bodies, and yet, writing these novels that transcend that? Are there others?
All I can say is there are a lot of people in the crime genre that are really great writing crime genre, but they're writing crime genre. I don't know too many crime writers who bust out of the corral. I mean, the thing about crime writing is you can't remember who did it, who did what to what. I might read The Big Sleep or Farewell, My Lovely, or The Maltese Falcon. Who cares who did what to what? You read crime for the narrative voice and for the atmosphere and for creating a memorable central character and evoking a time and a place. Everything else is, popcorn.
Many questions. Sir at the back. Yes.
Hi, thanks. Could you speak a little bit about the role that drugs play in the writing process, if they play a role for you?
In drugs?
Drugs, like you mentioned cocaine briefly, Adderall. And I'm wondering if that's something that does play a role in the writing process in terms of creativity or otherwise.
Well, even William Burroughs said he's never written a damn page that was any good on drugs. Apologies to Thomas De Quincey, but I think drugs are the enemy of real creativity. I mean, not to sound like a moralizer, but I'm haunted by my own experience with drugs. But when I try to write on that, Adderall, I do take Adderall because sometimes I just feel like I don't want to write. But with Adderall, it'll just give me a little bit of a boost. And so when I open it, I get lost in working really fast. But my writing is haunted by drugs because of my own experience. Clockers, I was just sniffing coke, like party coke. When crack came along, I finally figured out how to make cocaine affordable to poor people. And it was 10 times deadlier. This is cocaine is God's way of telling you you're making too much money. But this is not coke. And when crack, I was so haunted by my own years on cocaine. When crack became a phenomena, and it was the quintessence of not the end of the world in a white rock. You couldn't read the sports pages in those back in the late 80s where crack, even they'd say, well, Yankees 4, crack 3. Crack has just drafted a new crackhead. It was pervasive, and it just haunted me, and that drove me to write Clockers. I mean, like I said, autobiography seeps in. I'll tell you, my experience trying to write on coke, quite bluntly, I was 30 years old. I'd do a line to get me started. I'd do a line, I'd write a paragraph. I go, that's a great paragraph. Let's celebrate. Write 2 more lines. That was a great 2 more lines. Anybody up for a boop? Write 1 line. Or write, those are great 3 words. Let's have a bump. And pretty soon I started out allegedly snorting coke in order to write. And then it got so horribly perverted is I was writing as an excuse to do coke. And at one point, I'm working on something. I had 100 pages, and each page was great, but each page was for a different book. So it made no sense. It was too, it's like an oscillating beer sign, by the jukebox. I think drugs is listen, some people, there are serious drugs that need to be taken by people who are suffering from stuff that makes them drop down a hole that nobody can understand if they haven't had that malady. There's that type of drugs. Recreational drugs, nope. Alcohol, nope. You can't do any of that stuff and keep a coherent, flowing mind. And that's been my experience. And that's it. I mean, I wouldn't even go for a second cup of coffee because I'll just buy 7 more books on ebooks. Instead of writing. Now I got 14 books I'll never read.
Maybe one last question. Sir, here in the front. Actually, sir, go ahead. Yeah.
Do you have any examples of scripts you've written and there was a big change, either like that was a great change or like, oh my God, I can't believe they did that?
Could you be more specific? I'm not quite.
Like if you wrote a script and then and then it got produced. Let's say I don't know, like was Color of Money first? Was the protagonist a 12-year-old girl originally or something like that?
No, that's screenwriting and TV writing is all business. You don't have the whim, you don't have the power of whimsy to change your mind because you're getting paid by people who are creating a product. And they know the reason why you're writing it is that they gave it thumbs up. Yeah, this sounds great, go do it. And you can't come in, I decided that 12-year-old girl, she should be a 400-year-old man from another planet. It works so much better. They're gonna look at you and you're done. You can't do that. Whereas there are some great stories about writers who started out doing one thing and halfway through they switched from a car to an airplane. I had a writing teacher, I was a mid-century British novelist, Alan Sillitoe, who wrote Loneliness and a Long Distance Runner and Saturday Night and Sunday Morning. And some of these books were part of the black and white British cinema of the late 50s and the early 60s. And when he was writing Saturday Night and Sunday Morning, Richard Harris played the main character. He said the main character that he intended was a sailor, and he was going to comes into a bar, I think it was in Nottingham. So he comes into the bar, and he challenges any of these factory lugs to a drink-off. I can drink any man under the table. He said, well, now I have to create a character to take up the challenge. So he starts writing the drink, these guys are drinking and talking, this and that. All of a sudden he realizes he likes this guy a lot better than the sailor. So he finished the scene by having the sailor pass out and get dragged out of the pub and the book. And it became about the guy that took up the challenge. But you can do that with a novel. It's yours, it's yours until you surrender it.
Are there any times when a director or producer or whoever will change something and it was a pleasant surprise?
Well, okay, glad you asked. Not constantly, you write a lot. You write. Who do you think you are, anyhow? And it's the way it comes. Who do you think you are, anyhow? It's blah, blah. But I'll tell you a story. There was a great novelist named Leonard Gardner, and he wrote a book called Fat City, which was about Tanktown boxes, like Night of the Tomato Can boxes. And it was Stockton, it was Steinbeck country. And it was a beautiful, beautiful novel, kind of Hemingway-esque, but better. And I read that book when it came out. I loved it. And I was at a party in San Francisco, and John Huston made a movie out of that with Jeff Bridges and I forgot who else.
Stacey Keach.
Right, exactly. So I meet Leonard Gardner at a party, and here's what you should never say to a novelist at a party, especially when there's alcohol. So what did you think of the movie they made of your book? So I asked him that question, and he's built like a whippet. I think he was a boxer himself at some point. He was just a coil. He wasn't even a man. He was just a coil of muscle and tension and quiver. But when I asked that question, he literally started shaking. I thought his temples were going to explode. And he started cursing out John Huston. That son of a bitch. Anytime he thought he could screw a girl, he gave her an extra line. That didn't right. And he did this and he did that. And it was like talking to the Ancient Mariner on steroids. And I said, oh my God. And I was thinking of adapting one of my own books. I had an offer. And I said, after that, I said, God damn, I'm never going to touch my books, which I should have stuck to. And I said, God, I'm so sorry, Leonard. Well, what are you doing now? I'm writing a script for John Huston. And he went, oh my God.
Oh, dear. Well, perhaps that's a good place for us to stop. Richard, thank you so much. It was a wonderful visit.